I want to run a little test here, and what I want to do is, I think you guys have a broken table here. I don't know who broke it, so, yeah, sorry guys. Unbroken, not the table. That thing's broken. I want to run a little test here, and I want you guys to just, I'm going to say a list of names, and I want you to just check. How do you feel when I say those names? No audible responses required, but there we go, fixed it. No audible responses required, but I'm just going to say a name and just want you to check. What do I experience when I hear that name? So we'll start it off nice and easy, okay? Donald Trump. No audible responses required. Okay, well, we'll swing it the other way. Justin Trudeau. Miley Cyrus. Justin Bieber. Simon Cowell before he rebranded as a nice guy. The entire Calgary Flames lineup. Okay, I'm gonna turn it up a little bit. Your mother-in-law, father-in-law, your ex, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. The list could go on. I'm sure I could say lots more polarizing people. Biden, Harris, Elon Musk, whatever. People who use Android phones. I mean, come on, let's be realistic. They are ruining group chats. They are turning all of our messages green, right? Am I right, Apple? Yes. Ridiculous. Actually, it's gotten a little bit better, but do you remember when you'd be in a group chat and there's one Android person, so then every time anybody reacted to a message, it would type out, this person liked, and it would write out the whole, yeah, anyways. People who use Apple phones, I'll throw it the other way for you people. I wonder if throughout that list, if there were moments where you felt a little bit of or like a clenching, or like a, I wonder if through that list of names or thinking about people like that, and I could say lots of other names, and for you, maybe you could fill in the blanks with names that might make you feel a little bit riled up. I wonder if you sat through that just feeling compassion, patience, kindness, gentleness, peace. If we're honest, probably most of us didn't. Maybe for you guys, parents leaving on Sunday morning, I should have said your kids, getting them in the vehicle and out the door. I wonder if we feel that, right? There's this expression that I really don't love in life. It's one of my least favorite expressions. I've heard it a lot, and it's this expression that says, people never change. People never change. You've heard people say that. Lots of us actually probably believe that a lot, because functionally that's often true. People often don't change. But the whole premise of the Bible, the whole premise of what we're talking about in this Unbroken series is that people can change. If you weren't here last week, you don't need to go watch the whole thing, but if you want, you can go hear the story at the start about the guitar. It kind of lays the framework for this. I'm not going to rehash it for everybody, just because people decided to skip last weekend. That's on you, okay? So, just kidding. But the idea is that in our brokenness, God actually makes us new and stronger and better and rebuilds. We looked at 2 Corinthians 5, where it says that God has removed the old and he has made us new. It's this amazing message of reconciliation, of peace. And last week we were looking at what it means to kind of be the reconciliation that happens between us and God. Our brokenness, our sin, it takes us away from God, and that reconciliation. This week I want to look a little bit at our reconciliation between us and others. And then in 2 Sundays, we're going to look at reconciliation between us and ourselves. So last week we looked at the story in Luke 19 of this little guy named Zacchaeus, and we're going to just look at that for a few seconds again. So Luke 19 starts off with this story where Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. Verse 2, it says, a man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. So again, if you weren't here last week, we didn't spend a lot of time in this passage, but there's this old story about this tax collector. He's ripping people off, he's exploiting people, he's taking from people unfairly, and he's rich. He lives in this community. It wouldn't be a massive place. People would see him, they'd see him rolling up in his new cyber truck, and they'd be like, well, I know how he paid for that. I'm driving a Kia because this guy's got all my money. He took my money and he's rich and he's flaunting it. He's a wealthy guy. Imagine how people would feel about Zacchaeus. How would you feel if like your neighbor was siphoning all your money and then like their house was getting renoed and they had like a nice car and they had all this stuff and they're like, oh, we're going away to the Bahamas. Could you like take care of our pets? And we're paying for it with the money that we took from you. We wouldn't like that, right? We would not be cool with that. Most of us in the room, I think, are old enough that we've been stabbed in the back by someone before. We've had a friend turn on us. We've had a family member really hurt us. We've had someone that we trusted or someone we thought we could rely on. We've had a relationship that just has not gone the way we had hoped or expected. We've experienced that. And if you haven't, I'm like so happy for you in a sense, but I'm also like brace yourself, because at some point on this broken planet, in the same way that you will do that to other people, people will do that to you. People will let you down. Things will get broken. Relationships will get splintered. People will get hurt, and you'll hurt other people. This is our human condition, is that happens. Now, Zacchaeus is a great example of the selfish natures that we often operate with, where it's just like, here's what I want, and even if it costs someone else, I'm going to take it. You think people like Zacchaeus? I mean, I know people didn't like Zacchaeus because 2,000 years later, when I grew up in the church, we sing a song and all we do is make fun of his height. You know that song? Zacchaeus, a wee little man was he? Like, that's the only line I know. We're just making fun of the guy for being short. We're like literally trash talking a guy for 2,000 years. He's one of the biggest villains in the Bible. Okay. He was a chief tax collector and he was rich. He had exploited people well. Verse 3, he wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. And when Jesus is coming there, you know, the reaction that we would expect, when we're reading the Bible, we have a different expectation. If we were there with Jesus, we would expect Jesus to ignore this guy and to stay focused on hanging out with us. But when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once, and he welcomed him gladly. So Jesus sees Zacchaeus, and he doesn't say, hey, Zacchaeus, I've heard what you're like. Zacchaeus, I saw an excerpt on Fox News, or I saw an excerpt on CNN, or whichever thing, Straight Arrow News, if you want to be, whichever one, and I've heard that you're bad. I know what you're like. You know, I read a tweet from my favorite celebrity saying that you should be canceled. So, you know, it's like I've heard about you, Zacchaeus. I know what you're like. I know what you're up to. I see your heart. Jesus knows everything about this guy. He just says, amen. I'd love to hang out with you. And the people around, the reaction is quite surprising. They're like, yes, this is the best. Jesus is going to hang out with Zacchaeus. We're so happy that the Savior has come who loves broken, hurting people. It's so awesome that Jesus is going to go spend time with Zacchaeus and embrace him because he's a broken, hurting man, right? This is what the people said and responded. They were so overjoyed and happy that they could see the good news in real time and reconciliation. That must be it. Verse 7. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner. This reminds me of my daughters, and I talk about them a lot because they remind me of how I relate to God a lot. So often, one of them will get something, and the other one will be like, no fair. I'm like, you want to know no fair? If you want to and I just want to do the same with them. It's like, if we could equalize out the opportunity and luxury that all the kids on the planet have and make it all fair, you guys wouldn't like that. They get jealous and envious so quickly. And this is exactly what happens with the people are following Jesus. He's preaching this message of peace and reconciliation and kindness and compassion. But then when he actually shows it, people are upset. What would happen if we did that to the polarizing people of today? There's this pastor named David Platt. Maybe you've listened to him before. Not awesome speaker. Years ago, Donald Trump, and again, I know polarizing guy, and you might have some deep feelings about that's fine. But it's like he shows up at the service. They have him on stage, and David Platt prays for him. And there was crazy controversy around it. And they had to the church had to apologize to people and stuff like that. And I realized there's hurt and there's pain and there's complexity and stuff. David Platt prayed for a guy and was kind to a guy. That's the thing, right? That's the good news of the Bible, is that that's what we're called to do. But many of us adopt the idea, people can never change. This person's like that. And we write people off and we operate in that kind of brokenness. I think Jesus is like, listen, I want to show you that healing and reconciliation and restoration is possible at every single turn. So the passage we're going to be looking at this morning is Colossians 3:12-15. Colossians 3 starts out by Paul writing and saying, since you've been set free in Christ, and since you've died to your old way of life, set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. Translation is, have the mind of Jesus. Have the vision and the sight and the love of God, rather than kind of adopting like a short-term, temporary, worldly view of how we relate to life and to ourselves and to others. Set your sights above. Set your minds on things above. Verse 12 says, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Again, isn't it fascinating how we can just say a name and we can be like, oh, and like what is that? Like, it's like an anger or a bitterness or an angst or whatever. And I said like a handful of political names, and I don't know if all of us actually even care about politics that much. Some of us maybe do. There might be different categories you care about that much. One of the things I'm constantly reminded of is that Jesus was born into a political climate that was a lot crazier than the one we have nowadays. When he was born, I don't know if you've heard the story, but there's a king who decided to kill all the babies because he was threatened by a baby, right? Like he's like, hey, there's a baby that's born. I feel threatened, so I'm going to kill all the babies. Did Jesus grow up and start writing a blog, an anti-Herod blog, and be like, guys, like here's what you got to think. It's like, did he start doing that? He didn't. He hardly even talked about it. Later, different king, but he was put to death by the regime that was persecuting people. And Jesus was pretty silent about it. He was mostly focused on funneling his language through the lens of kindness, compassion, and reconciliation, speaking out the good news rather than just speaking against the bad news. Now, I'm not saying we have to not have opinions, none of that. But what I am suggesting is that if we're people who are like going the way of the world and like being told that we should allow hatred and anger and bitterness to be a chief principle in our hearts just when we hear the name of a person who is created in the image of God the same way we were, someone Jesus died on the cross for their sins just like he did for us. Jesus says in Matthew 5, God causes the sun to rise on the holy and the unholy, like the righteous and the evil, like everybody he loves and he provides for. Yet we think, for us, it's easy in our culture to think, you can just hear a name and just be like filled with like feelings of hate and anger and bitterness. Listen, I'm not preaching at you. I get it. I've been there. I've had many challenging moments in relationships. I've had many things break down. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved. This word holy, it just means being like in a different category than the sinfulness of the world. This is the main attribute of who God is that he is holy. He's untouched. He's unscathed by the brokenness of this world. He's outside of it. You are dearly loved and holy. You're set free from sin. You've been reconciled to God. You are made new. So why then allow the sin of broken relationships, of hurt, of frustration, of anger to carry around in your heart when you could rather be clothed with compassion and kindness and gentleness and humility and patience? I love that humility is on that list because it takes a lot of humility to look at someone and to not try to assume their intentions, to not try to judge them, but to actually look at people and say, you know what, they're probably trying their best and fumbling around and making some mistakes. There's that like other old expression, hurt people, right? Hurt people. And we hear that when we're outside of a situation. We're like, yeah, it makes sense. But when someone hurts us, we're like, no, they're just a dirtbag, right? Like they're out to get me, they're bad, stuff like that. I would imagine that most people are hurting people because there's something fundamentally broken inside of them. But rather than look at them with compassion and say, I'm so sad that they're so broken that they've hurt me, there's just usually this anger, this get evenness. And Jesus doesn't do that. He just says, Zacchaeus, I'd love to come have dinner with you, bro. I'd love to come hang out with you. Clothe yourselves with compassion and kindness and humility. I have this picture that, relationships, they break. People hurt you, you'll hurt people, things happen. I have this picture that it's kind of like you're holding a relationship like you're holding like a glass of vase or something like that. And you drop it and it shatters and it breaks into a lot of pieces. And that's sad. That's too bad. But what we do is we like reach down and we grab the shards of glass and we squeeze them tight, and they pierce our hands and they continue to cause pain. And they continue to cut us and they continue to wound us. And I'm not saying it's not tough, but when sin breaks or hurts or causes damage, our choice to like carry around that sin with us is just choosing to like remove ourselves from the holiness and the reconciliation that God's invited us into. It's like bitterness, unforgiveness, and anger and frustration is just like holding those shards of glass and hurting yourself over and over and over by that's already, it's happened, it's been broken, and it can actually be fixed. I wonder if we believe that Jesus giving his life on the cross is actually big enough to heal our like the worst thing that person's done to you. And you're probably thinking of that person who's hurt you or wounded you or whatever. The worst thing that they've done, I wonder if we actually have an imagination of Jesus' forgiveness and grace on the cross that says it's actually so big that it could actually heal that reconciliation is actually possible. I'm not saying it will happen because there's another party involved, but I wonder what would happen in our hearts if we actually believed that reconciliation was always possible. Clothe yourselves with kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against, and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. I saw this reel a little bit ago. It's really interesting. This pastor talking about forgiveness. And he's like, when you forgive someone, it doesn't do anything for them. It doesn't like magically change their life. And that's not entirely true, because if you forgive someone and they know it, like it can impact them. But it's like, it doesn't, like, he's like, when you forgive, what you're doing is you're letting go of those shards. Like you're doing something you need to do. You're doing something for yourself when you forgive. You're doing something, you're cleansing yourself from the sin and the brokenness of that which caused the hurt and the damage in the first place. That lack of forgiveness isn't really hurting that person. It's you saying, hey, I want to take all that sin and I want to carry it around in my heart. And I'd rather choose angst and anger rather than compassion, kindness, and humility. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. Jesus talks about this in Matthew 6. When he teaches us how to pray, he gives us a short sample prayer. What does he say? This is the scariest part of the prayer. It says, God, forgive me my debts as equal to in the same way that I forgive other people. How many of you feel today that if all of a sudden today was the day when you went to meet Jesus and he's like, hey, I'm just going to forgive you the same way you've been forgiving like your mother-in-law or like your neighbors or the people you watch on social media, or like, and Jesus is like, I'll just forgive you that way. How many of you would be like, all right, where's the other place? Like I might be in the wrong spot. It's like, it's a good run. Thanks for everything, Jesus. Nice meeting you. Can I get an autograph on my way out? But it's like, right? Man, I struggle with this so much. Honestly, if I'm honest, this has probably been one of the biggest failing points in the history of my life, is just choosing frustration rather than having a big enough vision for reconciliation and compassion and kindness and humility when others have wronged me. When someone wrongs me, do I have the humility to say, you know what, I've messed up too? How often when we're driving, someone cuts us off, we're like, hey, that idiot. As though you've never cut someone off, right? You've been in a Costco parking lot. You've pretended that someone wasn't waiting for that spot before you. You've done it. Yet that person's the idiot. That person's the, I won't say the words right now because, I want to be invited back in 2 weeks. But it's like, what is that? We give ourselves such a pass We know our intentions, but we judge the intentions of others. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. What did Zacchaeus even say to Jesus before that? Did he prove a whole bunch of things? Did he say, Jesus, hey, you know what? I'm going to make it right. I'm sorry. I've done this. Here's my big apology letter. Here's me going to change my life. I went and I volunteered for 3 months at the local church. No, it's like he didn't do any of that. Jesus just knew reconciliation was possible. Just said, hey, I want to hang out with you. I want to offer you a gift of mercy and grace. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. 2 Corinthians 5 teaches us that we are Christ's ambassadors. In the same way Jesus reconciled us, he's inviting us to reconcile others to him. How can we teach people a message of God's great, infinite forgiveness and love if we choose to carry around anger and hatred toward people we don't even know, people that we're close to, people that we should love? We carry that around and we tell people, oh yeah, God is so loving and kind. And they're like, well, then why were you just talking trash about your coworkers? That doesn't make sense. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body, you were called to peace, and be thankful. As members of one body, you were called to peace and be thankful. Over the years working in churches, one of the things that, and this is maybe a bit of a hot take, and I'm fine with that. I've got lots of hot takes if you ever want to hear some more. But one of the things I've noticed is a lot of times churches in a city will be like, we should do an event together so we can show the city that we're unified. And it's like, well, why aren't you unified? It's like, why are you trying to prove it to the neighbors? Just do it. Get unified, right? It's like, then you'll probably do some stuff together, right? It's like this big thing. It's like, we do this stuff. And it's just like, well, it's like, are you even unified within your own church, right? Are you guys people that, what percentage of your people are angry or hold grudges with each other on a Sunday morning and don't really talk to each other? How many people are just waiting to send the angry email to the pastor? Now, we should have honest, real conversations and stuff like that. If your pastor brings in some weird looking, Captain Hook knockoff pastor who says some stuff that you don't like, or you should maybe let him know your opinion. But it's but how many of us are we already have brokenness in our own faith community, and we're oh, let's put on an event, and people know neighbors don't care if you're doing an event together or not. Get unified. Jesus cares if you're unified. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. Here's my picture. I want to imagine that instead of Jesus giving you infinite grace, what he's given you is an infinite Skittles vat that goes on your front lawn. It's a giant vat of Skittles. It's massive, bigger than a swimming pool. You can go up, you can dive into it. You guys remember the old Scrooge McDuck thing on DuckTales where you dive into the money? Really, he should be in a hospital with a concussion and stuff like that. I think the same would be true of Skittles. But just put on your DuckTales brain and imagine that you can dive into this vat of Skittles and you're swimming around. You don't even have to you just eat them, stuff like that. Infinite Skittles. As many as you eat, they keep refilling, and the Skittles never end. And it could be the Skittles gummies, it could be sour, whatever your jam is, whatever, right? It's you're swimming around in Skittles, and one of your neighbors comes along. They're like, hey, can I have some Skittles? You look over the edge, you're like, no, right? That'd be insane. I mean, you might not think that's insane, but it's if your neighbor had an infinite vat of Skittles, and you're like, hey, can I have some? And it's no, and you're like, well, we're replenished, right? It's how often we do it. God's grace isn't limited, right? It's not, there's no cap, God's grace isn't just something he gave to us so we can feel better about ourselves and we can be forgiven. He's hey, this will actually heal your relationships. Things can be healed. In Matthew 5, Jesus talks about broken relationships a fair amount, actually. Not all of it super directly, but he does say, he says, those people who persecute you, pray for them. Love your enemies. Bless them. Pray for them. It's actually become one of the most important practices in my life, is recognizing when Jesus says pray for those who persecute you, it's not just a command, but he's actually giving a prescription. He says if you're feeling angry with someone, bring me into that mental conversation you have with them. Most of us, when we're angry with someone in the shower, what we do is we usually just have the argument that we wish we were having with them, right? Most of us do. I think we do that. Anyways, if it's just me, that's whatever. What if you were just talk to God about them? Say, God, bless them. God, provide good things for their life. God, if they're broken, would you please heal that? Not, oh God, they're broken and stupid, and it's like, God, if there's something messed up there, would you help them? Would you please give them the same care and consideration that you've given me? Matthew 5, Jesus also talks about divorce. And he says you shouldn't get divorced. But he says, if your spouse is being unfaithful, then you can. He doesn't say you should. You can't. Notice he doesn't even say, like, hey, you should leave that person. Our world says, if someone's done something wrong, break it off. Jesus says, it's not sin if you do it like this. And I wonder if Jesus puts it that way, because he's like, you know what? Maybe down the road, like, reconciliation might still happen. And Jesus doesn't, like, stop waiting for us. He's not like, hey, Ryan, you got 1 month to get your stuff together, and then your forgiveness is off the table. It's like, if it takes you 50 years, Ryan, 80 years, I'll forgive you whenever you'll receive that. I'll reconcile with you whenever you receive that. I knew an old guy who his wife had been unfaithful to him for many years when they were younger, many years. And I'm not prescribing anything about your relational situation or do anything broad like that. But this guy, people said, why haven't you left her? And he said, that's my wife, and I'm committed to her. And he waited, and he waited, and he waited, and eventually she came back, and they reconciled. And he was patient and humble and full of compassion and kindness. And again, these are examples that don't apply to every situation, but I wonder if we could take the example of a man like that who just says reconciliation is always possible. In my experience, when I've gone through a tough moment in a relationship, there's been a fight, an argument, and we actually reconcile in a healthy way, like the guitar neck, it becomes stronger than it ever was before that. Going through hard stuff together is actually like a really valuable rebuilding thing. It exercises the muscle of grace in a relationship. I don't know what you're carrying today, and I hope that none of what I said sounds like aloof of like maybe a really deep, complex situation you're in. I get it. It's tough. I've been in many of those situations. But what I also know at the same time is that Jesus didn't just die on the cross for some things or for some people or for some situations, but he deeply loves you and the people in your life. And there's this vision and this picture in which you could say, yeah, come hop into the endless vat of God's grace with me, and through me, a conduit of God's reconciliation and grace and compassion and kindness and peace. Come experience God's forgiveness through me. If there's some brokenness, if there's some relationships in your life where it's broken, in Matthew 5, Jesus also says, if someone has something against you, whatever you're doing, even if you're at the altar offering a gift to God, stop and go and pursue reconciliation. In Romans 12, Paul says, if it's possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. In the body of the church and Jesus' kingdom, we can be people who carry peace, compassion, and kindness and humility. And that's pretty hard. Imagine what it would be like if the church was the one place where you could say a list of any names in the world, and we actually would sit there peacefully and just be like, yeah, I disagree with that person, but it's okay. I don't need to be angsty. I don't need to be angry. That'd be a pretty cool picture of like a reconciliatory community. I'd love to invite the band up. I'd love to pray for you guys. Anyways, let me pray with you guys. Jesus, thank you so much that you love us enough to give your life for us, to offer us peace, to offer us reconciliation, to offer us hope and forgiveness. That despite all the things that we've done, you continue to pursue us with love and kindness. Please give us the strength and the courage and the vision that we need to be people who can carry your message of reconciliation to others. We love you, Jesus. Amen.